Hi, this is part 3 of my Legend of Zelda series. We're going to start working on enemies in this episode. We won't be able to take or do damage yet, but we'll have a lot of setup for making enemies in the future. By the end of the episode, we'll have a Stalfos that could walk in 4 directions around the room, but underneath that, we'll have an entity class and a method of typing out directions more easily. The sprite for the Stalfos can be found in the link in the description. So, put the image into a new folder called Enemies. We'll make our Stalfos scene in the second half of the video. The player and our enemies will share a lot of code, so we're going to work on an entity class first. This means I'll use the same code found in one script so we don't have to copy and paste it for each enemy, and we can modify it more easily later. So, go to the script editor and make a new script in a new folder called Engine. Name the script entity.gd. So after extends, change it to kinematic body 2D. And we're just going to go into our player script, find our movement loop, sprite direction loop, and our animation switcher, cut it, and paste it into our entity class. We're also going to take our move direction and sprite direction variables and stick that up here and create a speed constant and set it to 0. So what we're doing is we're basically making a common script that both the player and any enemies could go into and use these functions. We're going to go back to player, change the extends to a path to that script, entity.gd. So now this is extending kinematic body 2D, which means it has access to all the functions and variables that every kinematic body 2D node has. Player is going to extend this script, so it's going to have all of the kinematic body functions, but also all of these functions and variables that we have in the entity script. Now, basically, any other entity we make, if we just put in extends and then a path to this file, it'll have all the functions that we made in previous videos available to it. And if we have to make changes to these functions, we could do it just from the entity script and not have to do it for every single scene or node that has these functions. Okay, so that's that. Let's just test it and make sure it still works. It does. And alright, now we're going to make a directions singleton. So previously, if we want to say up in our code, we would type vector2, 0, -1, or right is vector2, 1, 0. What we're going to do now is we're going to make it so we just have to type dir.up in order for it to mean the same thing. So go to File, New, and in our engine folder we're going to make a new script called directions. So erase all this. We're going to have 5 constants defined. Center, vector2, 0, 0, left, vector2, -1, 0, right, 1, 0, up, 0, -1, down, 0, 1. So now we're going to go to our project settings, go to autoload, path, select our new directions, shorten it to just dir, and then close it. Now in any script we could call dir.left or dir.right, blah 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 for all of those, and it will mean vector2, -1, 0, etc. I'm not going to change all of these right now. I might do it between videos, but if you want to, go ahead. So that's just going to make everything a lot easier to read. And we also want to make the singleton because I want to make a function that chooses a random direction and returns it. So create a new function called rand and make a new variable called d and set it to rand integer %4 plus 1. So what this does is it picks a random integer with a maximum value of 4 and a minimum of 1. And we're going to make a match statement for each one of those options. If it's 1, return left. If it's 2, return right. If it's 3, return up. And if it's 4, return down. Now in any script, we could type dir.rand and it'll pick one of these 4 vector2 values. So that's going to help for any enemies that we want to pick a random direction. We won't have to type this out for each one. Alright, now that's all the setup. We're going to actually make the Stalfos now. So create a new scene. Set the root node to a kinematic body 2D. Rename it Stalfos, and we're just going to save this into our enemies folder as Stalfos tscn. Now we want our animation player and rename it anim. A sprites and set our PNG to the texture to that new PNG. And we want a collision shape. And we're going to set that to a rectangle and make the extent 6.6. Oops, I accidentally disabled that. Okay, so hide that and lock this. Now we're just going to make a very simple animation real quick. I'm going to call it default. And make it loop. Go to our sprite. We're going to have the first frame not flipped and the second frame flipped. And press play. Set the speed to 4. And that's how our Stalfos is going to look. So now we could create the script. New script, leave it like that. And again, we're going to use our new entity.gd. So all of these functions will be available to our Stalfos. So set its speed to 40. And now there's 2 new functions, or 2 new variables. First one is move timer length, which will be 15, and the second one is just move timer. So the way that the Stalfos works in the Game Boy Zelda games are it just moves randomly in 4 directions for like half a second and then picks a new direction and keeps walking in throughout the room. So it doesn't like follow the player, it doesn't like walk until it hits a wall or anything. It just keeps changing directions every half second. So our move timer is going to be ticking down, and when it resets, it's going to turn back to its length at 15 and keep doing this over and over again. And every time it resets, we're going to change its direction. But first, let's make the ready function and play the animation we just made. Because we're not using like the sprite direction and all that for up, down, left, right, because it only has one animation and doesn't face different directions, we don't have to use the anim switcher in our entity script. But we're just going to play our default animation, and we're going to use that new random direction function like this. It's just going to set the move direction to a random vector2 from here. Now we have to make it go with our movement loop that we made in episode 1. It uses the same exact code. If we try it, we should probably place it in the room first. Once we load the room, it'll just pick a random direction and start walking there. So now we have to make it both bounce off the walls and do it when the move timer resets. So if move timer is greater than 0, move timer minus equals 1. So every frame subtract a bit from the move timer until it's 0. Now, when it's 0, if move timer equals 0, or it's on the wall, we're going to again switch this move direction to a random direction, and we're going to reset the move timer to move timer length. So now, if we press it, it starts moving in our random directions. It's going up, right, down, left, and we can't get hurt by it yet, but that'll come in the next episode. So yeah, we did a lot of setup, and I got to show you how enemies will generally be structured. And in the next episode, we'll deal with making the player take damage and possibly add the bow. We'll get to the sword later, but the way I did in the past was kind of dumb, so I'm going to think of a better solution before I make a video on it. So yeah, thank you for the great response to my last 2 videos, and I hope you're enjoying the series, and hope to see you in the next one.